Hi everyone, my name is HoodatQueen94. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a huge New Orleans Saints fan, as well as being a huge fan of the NFL. And Week 15 is all wrapped up, if you can believe it or not. And we had some really great games in Week 15. I mean, we had the Colts and the Vikings, which was NFL history. We had the Dolphins and snowy Orchard Park. Texans Chiefs, Jaguars Cowboys. Bengals coming back from 17 points, or being down 17 points. Doesn't feel that great now, does it, Bucs fans? Yeah, but the Steelers helping us to stay alive in the race, and that crazy ending with the Raiders and the Patriots. I guess what happens in Vegas usually leads to great stories. Trust me, I know that. But we've got, a few games to talk about, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into them. And yes, I am outdoors, and it is a little breezy, but I hear that tonight it's going to be super windy and super chilly, so this is the best that I could do. So let's talk about the Falcons at Saints. So let's get into it. So in the first quarter, Saints get the ball to start. After a series of completed passes, Dalton throws to Juwan for 19 yards for the 19-yard touchdown. At 10:06 to make it a 7-0 game. Ritter's debut is a quick 3-and-out. Taysom throws a bomb to Shaheed for 68 yards to make it a 14-0 game with 8:17. Dalton is sacked with 2:23, forcing the Saints to punt for the first time in the game. Saints lead 14-0 to end the second quarter. The Falcons go downfield on a decent drive to get into Saints territory. Ridder is sacked on third down in the red zone, forcing the Falcons to settle for a field goal for 28 yards from Koo to make it a 3-14 game with 11:15 to go. Saints get downfield with a series of plays. Hill throws to Juwan for 12 yards to get into the red zone. With 7:21, David Johnson fumbles it, and the Falcons take over. Saints get to Ridder, and the Falcons are forced to punt to give it right back. Saints are then forced to punt with 3:27. Falcons are then forced to punt it back with 15 seconds left. Saints lead the Falcons 14-3 to end the first half. Third quarter. Falcons get the ball to start. Ritter's pass is an interception by Taylor, but it's overturned, which keeps the drive alive for the Falcons. Algiers gets a huge run for 43 yards to put the Falcons in the red zone. Algiers takes it for the 5-yard touchdown with 10:46 to make it a 10-14 game. Saints go downfield. Dalton throws to Johnson for the 22-yard score with 3:34 to make it a 21-10 game. Saints lead Falcons 21-10. And I know I keep calling him Algiers. It's Algier. My bad. Fourth quarter. Falcons have the ball to start the fourth and are forced to punt. Saints get the ball back, and Dalton is sacked, forcing the Saints to punt it with 11:07. The Falcons march downfield on a good drive. Patterson gets the 3-yard touchdown for the Falcons with 7:07. And the Falcons would then go for 2. Algier makes it a 18-21 game. Saints are forced to punt with 6:06. Falcons start driving downfield. Falcons go for it on 4th and 5 with 2:13. It's caught by Drake London at midfield, but it's popped loose and recovered by Bradley Roby. Saints have the ball at the 2-minute warning after a series of runs. The Saints failed to convert on 4th and 1. With 9 seconds left and turn it over on downs. Ridder steps out of bounds to end the game. Saints beat the Falcons 21-18. All right. A win is a win, and not that I'm not thrilled about, beating the Falcons and tying the all-time series at 54-54. But it really did feel like the Saints were going to run away with this game relatively early. And I think that's the fastest that we've scored in a game so far this season. The offense was in sync, they were in rhythm, and it just sort of fell flat. So what happened? Let's break it down. It seemed, again, as I mentioned, it seemed like the Saints finally did something that they hadn't really done all season, in the first 5-ish minutes, if you will, and the offense looked great. Dalton and Hill worked really well together, but I feel like the momentum was lost when David Johnson, fumbled that ball. And I raved about him, and, I know he's a family man. I know he means well. So, I feel bad for him, but, it was I wouldn't say it was a critical mistake because, the Falcons did punt it back, so they didn't get anything off that turnover, but, he has to be more careful, obviously. That goes without saying. But in his defense, I think it was a weird play call, because I felt like that could be a quarterback sneak. It felt like a quarterback sneak. So it kind of felt like, to use David Johnson on that 3rd and 1, it just didn't seem like the right call. So in his defense, it just didn't really make that much sense to have him when you have Kamara and you have Taysom, and I guess Andy Dalton is very good at the QB sneak. But either way, there were instances prior on defense where we could have had turnovers, but we'll get into the defense in a little bit. So, Dalton had a Dalton-like day, a clean game, 2 touchdowns, 151 yards passing, no interceptions. Taysom also had a fairly well game as well, with 110 yards, one touchdown pass. And, we finally got back to using Taysom the way that we should be using Taysom. I think DA and Pete did a really good job of using him in this game. Finally, the receivers caught passes, which is what we've been wanting them to do for several weeks. So, it was great to see Juwan back. I know that he has that chemistry with Dalton. So, and obviously he had 2 touchdowns, so really, really impressive by him. Olave didn't have his best game, but he was useful, I feel. And I'm really starting to fall for Shaheed. Shaheed is my guy. Like, I really, really am starting to stand Shaheed a lot. I think that he's the unsung hero, if I'm being completely honest, because he's been consistent in these games. Either way, I still, well, getting back to him, he had 95 yards, 1 touchdown. I still think that there's communication problems between Landry and Dalton. So, that's something that they haven't been on the same page for a while now. But other than that, everybody seemed to do their job quite well. As far as the run game goes, we didn't have a rushing touchdown. I feel like Kamara sort of got his groove back on, with 95 yards, but still no touchdown. Obviously Johnson fumbled. So run game hasn't really been all that great these last few games. So, but 95 yards is still pretty good, I feel, for Kamara. But then I feel like the Saints started to play rather relatively conservatively. Because they only scored in the 1st and 3rd quarter, so that's not really great when you only score in certain quarters. But the Falcons did a really, really good job playing defense and, forcing the Saints to punt over and over again. We didn't settle for field goals, which is really, really great. It's really great not to have to settle for field goals and actually get the touchdowns. And we did not, punt the ball back to the Falcons, giving them an opportunity on that final drive. And we made them burn their timeouts. Overall, I say that this was a great effort on offense, better than we've seen in a while. Let's get into the defensive side. Now, I don't think I need to tell you how bad that run defense looked. That run defense was horrible. That defense is what kept Atlanta alive in this game, and if it weren't for some lucky out of the blue play, this could have been a very different outcome. We also had a fair share of missed opportunities with possible interceptions that went through defenders' hands, and you know what they say about corners and safeties, they're just receivers who cannot catch. That's why they're corners and safeties. And then there was that one interception by Taylor that was called back. But that's just the thing. The Saints have failed to get turnovers in every single game that they've played. So, again, and it was the dumb penalties. The dumb penalties that allowed the Falcons to sustain drives, keep drives alive, and, allowing them to run on us pretty much the entire game. Which is something that I thought they would do anyway, with Ritter coming in, this being his debut, that they might rely on the run game. But credit to Algier. I mean, if I knew he was going to go off that way, I would have started him in fantasy. So, he did really, really well. I had his numbers. I don't know where they are. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, 139 yards rushing for him, 1 touchdown, and the 2-point conversion. So, yeah, they did really, really well in the run. As far as the receiving goes, Ritter had 0 touchdowns, 97 yards, kind of what you would expect, nothing spectacular. Drake London was their leading receiver with 70 yards, so, yeah, I think that this was a poor job, obviously, by the run defense because they allowed Algier to have that type of game and to get downfield and to score on us. So, but the defense hasn't been great anyway. But that right there, I think, was the criticism of the day, at least in my opinion. The defense has been lacking, and the penalties as well. Like, the Saints can't seem to get away from that. But a win is a win, and a sweep is a sweep, and Saints dodged a bullet by surviving another week. Sorry, not sorry, Falcons. We'll see you next year. But in order to keep surviving on our end, we need to win out. So next off our checklist would be the Browns. Sorry about that. Okay, so I've contemplated about this a lot, and I've gone back and forth as to whether or not I should speak on this or not. And I'm going to make this as brief as I possibly can, sensitive, and very impartial. I want to make that clear. I'm trying to make this as impartial as I can. I wanted to avoid this. Unfortunately, this is something that I can't avoid. What Deshaun Watson has been accused of, or was accused of, is something so vile, despicable, and how he got an 11-game suspension for this season is beyond disbelief. Now, again, I want to make this clear. I wasn't there, you were not there. But allegation after allegation of similar encounters is too far-fetched to believe that all these are fabricated stories whose sole purpose was to take down what was once a thriving superstar athlete at his prime, only as a form of punishment by his former team for wanting a trade when he was still getting paid to sit out. I think that this is a theory perpetuated by keyboard warriors who think that all women are attention-seeking, gold-digging prostitutes whose only purpose is to leech off successful men. And the idea of a group of women of that magnitude coming out to sort of be in cahoots to take down someone for status, for financial gain, or simply ruin one's reputation just isn't plausible. Given the fact that the allegations are very similar, I think that there is certain proof that he was looking for these types of services and even going out of his way to get what he wanted. And it doesn't sound like a grand scheme, I should say. It sounds like a compulsion. It sounds like a need, a desire, a want to have, a fetish even, if you will, for sexual gratification or that of intimidation. But I get it though. Deshaun Watson is a highly respected athlete, or once was a highly respected athlete, who did a lot for the city of Houston and the state of Texas. His story of how he came into the NFL is a story of triumph, and a man who faced adversity, who the Texans jumped up to get in the draft. But that's the thing, people put on a facade all the time, and you never really truly know what goes on behind closed doors. We see it time and time again with high-profile celebrities, movie stars, singers, directors. We don't want to believe it. Nobody wants to believe it because it's not in their character from what we're told to believe in that person or from that person. But hey, he wasn't arrested. And with that, and knowing how selective the NFL is in punishing players, they thought 11 games was justifiable. And because of that, as long as you can win games in this league, or put your team in a position to make the playoffs or even a Super Bowl, the NFL will turn the other cheek, as long as it doesn't lead you in jail or it doesn't lead into a casualty. And we've seen this happen with multiple players in the NFL who've been accused of probably nothing of this magnitude, but of similar situations. And eventually people learn to deal with it. Years go on, and, it's just something that people just sort of move on with. They did it with Pittsburgh. They did it with the Steelers. So at what point, though, do we say enough is enough? Deshaun Watson put a lot of people in a very uncomfortable situation and in a very uncomfortable position. He himself did that. as I mentioned, I'm trying to be as impartial as I can, and I don't want to go on a tirade here. So it's just an unfortunate situation that we have to deal with. Now, moving on, we have to face the Browns. So let's get through it. So we play a game on Saturday in cold, snowy Cleveland, and we're going in with some major injuries, including Cesar Ruiz. It's a big loss for our offensive line, so how can we survive the blistering bitterness? Having to rely on good play calling is a good start. I thought that with the exception of a few miscues here, again, DA and Pete called a relatively good game offensively, and they found a way to use Taysom, which is what we obviously need to do or should do. And I'm sure they'll find a way to use him in this game. Dalton is going to have a clean game because, they've gotten a few interceptions on defense in these last 3 games. So Andy has to be cleaner with that, and he has been, so he hasn't thrown a pick, I think, in 3 games. And the only issue that I think Dalton has is taking those sacks. So he needs to snap out of that and stop taking those unnecessary sacks. But either way, they've been pretty good with defending the pass. So, and the run. So, but if the receivers get separation and catch passes, we could be effective in that. We have the receivers to do that. Shaheed could be the guy to step up and make the big play downfield. Johnson, Olave, maybe Dalton and Landry can find some common ground and actually, have some success together. But they're pretty good at defending the run as well. So they did let J.K. Dobbins go off on them, so who knows how Kamara or Johnson can do. But, we'll see how our running game measures up in that department. I do see this being a bit of a challenge for the offense, just slightly. But, again, don't get the stupid penalties, and I think we'll be able to be okay. Try to run the ball, catch passes, and don't turn it over. We can have success. On the flip side, Watson had 2 touchdowns. Has thrown 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the 3 games that he's played, so not the best start for him. They relied on the run game, and I'm not going to lie, with the way that the defense played, especially the run defense, I am worried about what they're going to allow Nick Chubb to do. Plus, we also have to look out for Kareem Hunt. So that's a double punch. So with the way that we allowed Algier to go off, it's a bit concerning to have those, that double threat right there. So we have to be better at stopping the run. But so if the Saints want any success in this game, they're going to have to keep them out of the red zone. They're going to have to contain both Chubb and Hunt. That should be our number 1 priority on defense. I would love to see the defense contain Watson by putting pressure on him, making him uncomfortable and sacking him. They have a good receiving core, I should say, with Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper and Njoku. So Watson does have weapons at his disposal, and we know that Watson does have quite an arm. He's quite an athletic quarterback. Again, we've been okay with defending the pass. So if we get a few turnovers and prevent the big play, and stop the run, I think we can have some success on defense. The reason the Saints are losing is because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. We might be 3-point underdogs, and we might be banged up, and it may be cold, but man, if this team has any chance to stay alive, they're gonna have to put up a fight. So that's the thing that's crazy about the NFC South, is that in reality it is anyone's game at this point because no one has been eliminated. And it's actually a trip having to watch this division, I'm not gonna lie. But I think that the Saints have just suffered way too many injuries and will sadly eventually succumb to their injuries. But we get to stay alive another week, and let's try to keep it that way, at least on our end. I think that's all I really have to say. Once again, my name is HudatQueen94. I'm also on Twitter under the same name, under Olave Saint Savior. But either way, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If not, that's okay. I totally understand. But yeah, if you'd like to subscribe, I much appreciate it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and go Saints. Hudat, baby. Okay. Bye-bye.